I never imagined I would be sitting at my dining table, working on my laptop, when a sharp, searing pain shot through my neck. I screamed in agony, "It hurts. It's hot." When I turned around, my mother-in-law was holding a hot curling iron with a look of pure malice on her face. At that moment of pain, I remembered she had been preparing to go to the bathroom earlier. She was holding the hot curling iron against my neck, a look of disdain in her eyes. She gave me a sarcastic smile and asked, "Even you, a parasite, can feel the heat," and added that she was testing the sensation of my skin. The irony of her words cut deeper than the burn. She accused me of living a luxurious life while being completely useless, yet she claimed she was the one working hard. When I asked why she would treat me this way, she dismissed my work entirely. She told me that staying at home wasn't real work, that I was just being lazy. She demanded that I stop leeching off of them. But the truth was, they were the real parasites. I was paying for everything, the $5,000 monthly rent, living expenses, and even their spending money. The injustice of bearing such treatment while carrying their financial burden became unbearable. She told me to get out of the house immediately, threatening that she didn't know what might happen next. I asked her to confirm if she really wanted me to leave, warning her that if I left, I would never return. Her response was cold and cutting. She said she was tired of taking care of a poor person like me. At that point, I became completely detached from this family and this house. With tears streaming down my face from both the physical pain and emotional anguish, I packed my bags and left my mother-in-law's house forever. My name is Carly, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married for 2 years. Before marriage, after graduating college and working at a company, I had become a freelance writer working from home. When my father had an accident, I couldn't leave my mother alone to care for him as he struggled to walk, so I had to quit my company job and return home. That's when I started looking for work I could do from home. I began with simple internet-related jobs before transitioning into freelance writing. As my father recovered and I had more time, I gradually took on more work. I discovered I had a natural talent for writing, and my income steadily increased. My readers gave me positive feedback, and direct contract offers started coming in. Before I knew it, I was earning more than I had as a company employee. During this time, I attended a gathering of college club friends. Someone called out, "Hey, isn't that Carly? It's been so long." That's where I reunited with Tyler, who would later become my husband. In college, Tyler had been 2 years younger than me, known for his quick decision-making and energetic personality, always the life of the party. After graduation, he landed a job at a prestigious international company. We hadn't interacted much in college, but that day we had our first deep conversation. Perhaps because our personalities were complete opposites, we never ran out of things to talk about. After meeting a few times, we naturally started dating. Tyler shared his dreams with me, telling me how he loved foreign fashion accessories and dreamed of opening a shop featuring his favorite pieces. He even mentioned he had already started preparing for it. I loved listening to his stories. His mature intelligence combined with childlike curiosity made his dreams seem completely achievable. Even someone as reserved as myself couldn't help but feel elated just listening to him. So when he proposed, I was overjoyed from the bottom of my heart. The turning point came about a year after our marriage. My father-in-law passed away suddenly, completely unexpected. Tyler asked if I would live with his mother for a while. Due to his father's work, his parents had been living in a luxury apartment for several years, but after his death, they couldn't afford to continue paying the high rent. His mother hadn't yet accepted her husband's death. She wanted to stay there a bit longer, and there was still about a year left on the lease. We could live together just for that period. Tyler explained that it would be too difficult for his mother to move right after his father's death, that she couldn't be alone. He assured me not to worry about the rent, saying he and his mother would pay it. However, he asked if I could help with living expenses until his father's inheritance came through, since the rent was so high. I agreed, thinking it wouldn't be a problem since it was just for 1 year. Although I wasn't interested in fashion or luxury items, I was curious about the interior of a high-end apartment. At that time, I naively underestimated what living with my mother-in-law would be like. I had no idea this would be the beginning of my ordeal. From our very first meeting, it was clear my mother-in-law didn't like me. When we announced our marriage, she made a cutting remark, asking how I had seduced Tyler, expressing disbelief that he would choose an older woman. I felt completely looked down upon. Fortunately, my father-in-law intervened then, but now he was gone. From the day we started living together, my mother-in-law made her intentions clear. She told me outright that she didn't recognize me as Tyler's wife. Hearing this, my spirit was already exhausted. My mother-in-law's behavior deteriorated from the very next day. She constantly criticized and made snide remarks, particularly about my supposedly insufficient participation in housework. She would scold me about my casual attire, asking if I realized where I was living. She insisted I should always be prepared for visitors. When I protested that these were just my house clothes, she demanded that living in such a place required maintaining a certain appearance. My mother-in-law showed no understanding of my work either. She questioned whether I was really earning money working from home. Tyler turned a blind eye to his mother's attitude. He would just say that his mother was feeling down because she had just lost his father, asking me not to mind it. I decided to endure this situation for a year. However, instead of improving, my mother-in-law's attitude only got worse. She would remind me that this was their home and I was merely an invited guest. She completely ignored my existence, treating me as if I were invisible. And then today, she finally attacked me with the hot curling iron. This was outright assault. I had reached my absolute limit. I called my husband and told him I was leaving his mother's house immediately. When Tyler asked why, I told him his mother had pressed a hot curling iron against my neck. He responded with disbelief, claiming his mother would never do such a thing and there must be some misunderstanding. I insisted it wasn't a misunderstanding. It had really happened. He tried to calm me down, suggesting we could talk when he got home. But I told him it was too late. I was leaving. After hanging up, I started packing my bags. I called a taxi and headed to my parents' house. My parents greeted me with shock, asking what had suddenly happened. I simply told them I had reached my limit. My neck was still throbbing with pain, but inside, I felt a sense of freedom. For the past year, while living in that luxury apartment, I had endured constant psychological torture. I knew I would never go back. It was time to start a new life. Looking back, I remembered her endless criticism, "That's not appropriate housewear. Jeans are unacceptable." She would insist I wear skirts and put on makeup before breakfast, claiming that was the luxury lifestyle. I would meekly respond a yes to her demands. She would criticize my cooking, asking if I had bought ingredients from the store she preferred, questioning how I could make such a poor meal with expensive ingredients. When I explained I had bought them from the luxury supermarket and made a simple salad because Tyler liked it, she would just sigh deeply. She would remind me that the supermarket was high-end, and scold me for embarrassing their family, warning that we never knew who might be watching. She would shake her head in disappointment, making me feel worthless. Back then, I made a firm promise to myself to try my hardest to win her approval, from my appearance to my cooking skills. Despite my daily efforts, her critical gaze never softened. At first, I could brush off her sarcasm and cold words, but gradually they became a heavy burden. I felt completely denied and powerless. One day, my mother-in-law's behavior became too much of a burden and I wanted to ask Tyler for help, but our relationship was not what it used to be. We used to enjoy time together every day, but after moving in, we rarely saw each other. He would apologetically tell me he was busy with work, looking exhausted. I couldn't bring myself to tell him what I was thinking. But everyone has their limits. I felt I needed to confide in Tyler about my stress. When I told him I needed to talk, he said he also had something to tell me. He had quit his job 3 months ago. Shocked, I asked him what he meant. He told me not to worry, saying he had already started another job. He reminded me of the shop he had always wanted to open, announcing he had finally launched it with Timothy. I was stunned that he hadn't told me such important news. Timothy had been a highly respected figure in our college club. He was admired for his leadership and charisma, having developed and sold gaming apps during college and demonstrated his talent by starting a startup with friends. There was no doubt about his capability as a business partner. I had even heard rumors about his recent success in web design. Tyler spoke in his usual gentle tone, but with a hint of guilt in his voice. He told me he hadn't wanted to worry his mother, promising to work harder and asking if I would support him. His words touched my heart, though I had my doubts. I agreed to support him. But then Tyler made an unexpected request. He asked if I could cover the entire rent for the house. A mixture of shock and confusion welled up inside me. I reminded him that he and his mother were supposed to split the rent, saying I couldn't possibly cover it all alone while already paying for living expenses. My chest tightened with anxiety. Tyler looked at me with sincere eyes and pleaded. He begged me, saying this was his dream and it was taking longer than expected to turn a profit. He wanted to invest more in advertising and promised to get the business on track before we moved out, saying he needed my help. Moved by his passion and sincerity, I couldn't refuse. I could manage the rent with my income, and fortunately, I had savings. More than anything, I remembered the day I decided to marry him, sharing his dreams and passion. I agreed, but specified it would only be until the lease ended, and told him I wanted to know more about his shop. He thanked me and showed me the shop's website. I was impressed by its design sense. When I offered to help, Tyler firmly declined. He told me to focus on my work and asked me not to tell his mother, saying he didn't want to worry her about the new development. My thoughts about my mother-in-law completely disappeared. I wanted to support Tyler's business from my heart. But the monthly payments gradually increased. I became responsible for managing the entire household budget, providing financial support to my husband, and even giving spending money to my mother-in-law. I could only pray for the lease to end quickly. My mother-in-law would tell me to get away from my computer and do some cleaning, saying I should be more proactive with housework if I was going to live there. I would hurriedly apologize, promising to do it as soon as I finished my work. She would dismiss my work as mere excuses, ordering me to hurry because guests were coming in the afternoon and telling me to leave after finishing the cleaning. My relationship with my mother-in-law never improved. From the day we started living together, I always had to leave the house after cleaning on days when guests were coming. The small consolation was that I could work anywhere with my laptop. But that day turned out differently. When I returned in the afternoon, my mother-in-law greeted me with a satisfied expression, telling me she had cleaned my room. Confused, I rushed to my office. The room was indeed cleaned. Or rather, my belongings had been reorganized. My laptop was gone. It had been on the desk before, but now it was nowhere to be found. I asked my mother-in-law where my laptop was. She casually told me she had thrown it away with its bag while cleaning the house. I couldn't believe my ears. She coldly said that I was always playing with my computer instead of doing housework, suggesting this would make things better. I exclaimed that this wasn't a joke, it was my work tool. She sneered at my reaction, saying my parents would be ashamed of my attitude. I couldn't take it anymore. My entire life was on that laptop, including important deadline work. I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. My mother-in-law said dismissively that it wasn't worth crying over, calling it just lounging around the house pretending to work. I couldn't reach Tyler by phone. He didn't respond to my messages either. That night, I finally gathered the courage to call my parents. I asked if I could come back home for a while. Afterward, I bought a new laptop and worked desperately to recover my lost work. I apologized to my clients and asked for their understanding. Fortunately, many clients were understanding of my situation. Now I am reflecting on my poor decisions of the past. The luxury apartment lifestyle wasn't meant for me. More importantly, I had lost my relationship with the person I loved. But this was a new beginning. I would never let anyone control my life again. I would walk my own path. That was my determination. I didn't have many belongings, but in the center of the room stood a large arched suitcase and 2 travel bags. When I asked my mother-in-law what this meant, she declared that this room was originally meant for guests. She said my way of cleaning wasn't acceptable, and if I wanted to use the room, I needed to pay an appropriate fee. If I didn't like it, I should leave immediately. She warned me not to think I could live this luxurious life for free. I swallowed my words, wondering why I had to endure such treatment. When I nodded slightly, she said with satisfaction that she would repeat it. She didn't recognize me as Tyler's wife. She snorted and returned to the living room. Tears of anger welled up in my eyes. I tried to contact Tyler, but he didn't answer his phone. When I sent him a message explaining what had happened, he just replied asking me to endure it a little longer. When Tyler came home late that night, I couldn't contain my anger and told him everything. He just told me to be patient a little longer, saying he was stressed from work too, and asking me not to mind his mother, just to hang in there a bit more. I protested, asking if he expected me to pay rent for my room now when I was already paying the full rent, saying I couldn't take any more unreasonable demands. Tyler quickly tried to calm me down, apologizing and promising to talk to his mother. He pleaded with me to endure just a little longer, saying we wouldn't have to see his mother after we moved out. His words slightly calmed my anger when he said we'd never have to see her again. The next morning, Tyler seemed to be talking with his mother before leaving. We had breakfast together, and for once, there were no sarcastic comments from my mother-in-law. Since the room was tidy, I decided to continue working at the dining table. My mother-in-law asked if I was going out today while looking at my computer. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my neck. I screamed, "It hurts. It's hot." There stood my mother-in-law with a mocking smile, holding a hot curling iron. All I could do was cry out, "What are you doing?" Holding my painful neck, I ran to the refrigerator looking for something cold. Looking back, I remembered she had been preparing to take a shower earlier. She had used that same iron she had just pressed against my neck. She sneered that I could feel heat after all, saying she wanted to see how thick my skin was. She called me useless while living a luxurious life, claiming she was working hard too. When I asked why she would do such a horrible thing, she dismissed my work from home as just an excuse to be lazy. She told me I was unemployed and should think about their situation and become independent. I couldn't understand why I was being treated this way when I was actually paying both the rent and living expenses. I realized I was glaring at her. She commented on my look, calling it the eyes of an arrogant person. I told her I had reached my limit and she needed to leave the house immediately, or I didn't know what would happen. She asked if I really wanted her to leave, warning that she would never come back. I told her that was fine, that I was tired of taking care of someone like her who always looked down on me. With intense pain and disappointment, I packed my bags through my tears. Thanks to my mother-in-law's organizing of my belongings the day before, it didn't take long. Nothing that happened in this house mattered anymore. I left my mother-in-law's house without looking back. After receiving treatment at the hospital, I tried to collect myself at my usual cafe. The spacious table arrangement and quiet atmosphere were perfect for concentrating on work. Just as I was thinking about contacting Tyler, someone suddenly called out to me. To my surprise, it was Timothy. I frowned while responding that it had been a while, apologizing for not greeting him as a co-manager since Tyler was in his care. Timothy looked confused, asking what I meant by co-manager, saying he had only helped Tyler with the website design. He expressed surprise, mentioning he had heard I was the sponsor. I was shocked by this conversation. Tyler had rented another apartment and seemed to be working hard for the first few months. However, from the beginning, he had left inventory management and shipping entirely to others, and instead of promoting the online shop himself, he was paying for advertising services. At first, I had advised him to do things himself, but he insisted it wasn't the role of a business owner. He seemed obsessed with his idealized image of being a business owner. As a result, there was no increase in customers or sales, only mounting expenses. According to Timothy, Tyler had given up quite early. Now Tyler was deeply involved in internet business ventures, paying high consulting fees. Timothy mentioned something that shocked me, asking if I had heard about my father-in-law's inheritance. He revealed there had been considerable debt, though not as much as expected. He said my mother-in-law was managing her share, so they should have been financially comfortable. Then he added that Tyler had said it was okay if he failed because his wife had a good income. I was stunned, telling Timothy that even those funds were running out. Suddenly everything made sense. The reason I had to pay my mother-in-law's allowance was that they had used up the inheritance. Tyler's increasing demands for financial support must have been because their funds were running dry. He had never told me about the inheritance. With this new information, all of my doubts were answered by Timothy's explanation. Despite the pain, I managed to get to my feet, said goodbye to Timothy on unsteady steps, and headed towards my parents' house. My parents welcomed me warmly. They were there for me and told me that maybe I had been pushing myself too hard on myself. Their warm words brought fresh tears to my eyes. Through my tears, I told them everything. The secrets, my mother-in-law's cruel treatment, and how I had been covering all the expenses for my in-laws' household. My parents were angry and cried with me. My father's words struck deep when he said I didn't need to go back to my in-laws' house and should live for myself from now on. After telling them everything, I felt a tremendous weight lift from my heart. I wondered what I had been living for these past few months. The only message from Tyler was a brief, "Where are you?" Similar messages came for a while, but when I continued to ignore them, his contact eventually stopped completely. I must have been that insignificant to him. But what I felt wasn't sadness. It was liberation. I no longer needed to meet anyone else's ideals or expectations. I could live my own life. 3 months have passed since I returned to my parents' home. I've found new work and my days are more fulfilling than before. Sometimes I remember those days in the luxury apartment. Among all that luxury, I had lost myself. Tyler offered no explanation or apology. But that's fine. This is the end. Now I'm walking my own path. Thanks to my parents' support, I've been able to start a new life. I don't need expensive furniture or a luxurious lifestyle. I've realized that peace of mind is the truest luxury of all. This is my life now. This is a story of learning to live for myself, not for others. And now, I am truly free, with unwavering determination. Just having a meal with my parents made me feel the warmth of family. Perhaps that was the simple moment of happiness I had been seeking all along. As I spent time in my parents' home, I felt myself gradually recovering. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from Tyler. Probably because the rent payment deadline was approaching. He asked where I was, suggesting we make up with his mother, who he claimed was sorry, asking me to come back immediately. I told him I was at my parents' house and planned to stay there, reminding him his mother had said she was tired of taking care of someone poor like me. I wouldn't return, and suggested we get divorced. He protested, asking why divorce, offering to start fresh somewhere new if living with his mother was the problem. I questioned why we needed to discuss anything now after his silence, and asked about his business. There was a moment of silence after my question. He hesitated, then said he was seeking advice from someone with business knowledge, mentioning the possibility of a big plan next month, and suggested looking for a new place to live. I told him to stop deflecting, saying I wasn't interested in talking anymore since he never shared important things with me, and that I would send divorce papers. But that night, Tyler suddenly appeared at my parents' house. I spoke to him through the door, keeping the chain lock on. He pleaded with me not to be angry, saying we should return, that his mother was remorseful. I told him not to be ridiculous, that his mother had thrown me out. When he told me not to take it seriously, I exploded. I asked if he knew why I left, showing him the burn on my neck where his mother had pressed the hot curling iron. I told him worse things could have happened, that I couldn't possibly return. He was shocked, asking why I hadn't told him, apologizing and saying his mother had claimed it was just a minor argument. The words, minor argument, ignited my anger. I had planned to proceed with the divorce without meeting face to face, but I couldn't contain my anger anymore. I felt equal rage toward both my husband and mother-in-law. I wanted to confront them both. The indignation burned inside me. I told him I wouldn't return and that he should go home, promising to contact him tomorrow. He asked if I really would contact him, saying he couldn't accept divorce without discussion, warning he would return tomorrow if he didn't hear from me. 3 days later, I arranged a meeting with Tyler and his mother at a cafe restaurant on the 30th floor of a luxury hotel. That day, I wore an elegant branded dress with my hair up to show my neck. My mother-in-law's face twisted with displeasure when she saw me. I smiled and thanked them for coming, telling them I had reserved afternoon tea for us to enjoy. Tyler seemed slightly relieved by my calm demeanor. Light refreshments were promptly served to our table. Before we began eating, my mother-in-law started to speak. She apologized for what had happened, saying she had been wrong and Tyler had scolded her severely. She asked if I would forgive her. I didn't answer immediately, continuing to eat my snack quietly. Then I turned my neck to show her the burn mark. I told her I could forgive, but not until this scar disappeared, then asked if she knew Tyler had quit his job. Tyler trembled with shock while his mother stared at him in surprise. She asked what I meant, saying he had claimed to be busy every day, still busy now, a successful businessman. My mother-in-law turned to Tyler, asking what I meant about him being a businessman and starting his own business. I watched with satisfaction as Tyler tried to make excuses under his mother's interrogation. Just then, tea was served to our table. I enjoyed the delicious sweets while watching Tyler and his mother argue. I commented that while the view from the luxury apartment was nice, the view from this 30th floor cafe was spectacular too. Then I asked Tyler what he had been so absorbed in lately, mentioning that I'd heard from Timothy about him giving up on the shop. The color drained from Tyler's face as he showed an expression of shock and fear. Meanwhile, his mother grabbed his arm tightly in confusion, repeatedly asking what was going on. I told them I knew everything, that Tyler had been more obsessed with appearing successful than being a real businessman. I pointed out that despite having no business sense, he had acted impulsively and used up all of his father's inheritance. When his mother demanded to know what I meant about using up the inheritance, I confirmed that Tyler had depleted her inheritance too, leading to their complete financial breakdown. Tyler tried to stop his mother, telling her not to worry, that he would find a solution. His mother asked if Tyler had betrayed her, her voice filled with despair as she leaned back on the sofa. Her expression was clouded with desperation, leaving her speechless. I continued calmly, revealing that I had been covering all the household expenses, including their allowances. The money Tyler had been giving her had come from my wallet, along with all his expenses while he played at being a business owner. His mother could only stammer in disbelief. Tyler revealed his true nature when he said not to worry because they had my income. I told him this was ridiculous, that I'd heard he was trying to start another business venture. I said he was just playing around with money when they were already at their limit, and told him to stop immediately. My words might have been harsh, but the situation warranted it. The cafe fell into a heavy silence. I drained what was left in my cup and made my declaration. I told them I couldn't take care of two troublesome people anymore, that they would have to manage next week's rent themselves, and we would proceed with the divorce through lawyers. I stood up, took out the divorce papers from my bag, and placed them on the table. Tyler pleaded tearfully, saying he didn't want a divorce. But even as he begged me not to leave, my mind was already made up. My mother-in-law's face was pale and trembling. She pleaded with me to wait, saying she was truly sorry and hadn't known that they couldn't survive without me. She begged for help, calling us family. The word of family came unexpectedly, but it was too late. I reminded her that she had previously said she didn't recognize me as family, and suggested we start with compensation for the burn. With those words, I left them both at the hotel. Tyler remained silent until the end, staring down at the ground from the high-rise. I wanted him to feel what it was like to fall from heaven to hell. This was the end of my revenge. After that, we got divorced. Tyler initially resisted, but quickly agreed when I threatened to report his mother to the police. Though I thought I could never forgive my mother-in-law, I knew her memory would fade once she was out of my sight. It was enough for me if they just stayed away from my life. So I demanded a substantial amount from Tyler as compensation for emotional distress. I heard they moved to a small apartment afterward. Apparently, the relationship between my spendthrift ex-husband and his betrayed mother has become hostile. My once arrogant mother-in-law is now working part-time cleaning jobs, seeking independence. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of that scene. Currently, Tyler is struggling with debt and working multiple night jobs. It seems being an employee suits his true nature better. Tyler's energetic personality that I once found attractive was, from a different perspective, merely impulsive and superficial. His obsession with living in a luxury apartment and his father's inheritance only served to expose his flaws more clearly. I continued working actively at my parents' home. Later, I met Timothy again, explained everything in detail, and expressed my gratitude. He appreciated my writing skills, and now I receive work from him. For now, I plan to focus on living for myself, alongside my parents. 1 year has passed since then. I rented a small apartment near my parents' house and continued my freelance work. With Timothy's introductions, I gained new clients and am living a more fulfilling life than before. Recently, I also started a blog drawing from my experiences. Articles about domestic psychological abuse and financial exploitation have received many sympathetic responses. The other day, I happened to see my mother-in-law while returning from shopping. Instead of her previous expensive clothing, she was wearing modest clothes and carrying heavy shopping bags. When she noticed my presence, she stopped for a moment with an expression as if she wanted to say something, but quickly looked away and hurried off. Watching her retreating figure, I felt strangely refreshed. The scar on my neck has become almost unnoticeable thanks to medical treatment. But I'm not ashamed of this scar. It's proof of the turning point in my life and a precious memory that helped me reclaim my self-worth. My relationship with my parents has grown even deeper than before. We have meals together on weekends, discuss future investments with my father, and try new recipes with my mother. They fully support my new life. I'm still cautious about new relationships, but I don't feel the need to rush. Right now, I want to focus on my work and my own growth. Sometimes I go out to eat with friends or attend yoga classes as a hobby, spending peaceful days. The most important thing I learned this year is that my life belongs to me. There's no need to conform to others' expectations or values. Even if they're family, no one has the right to take away your happiness. My new life has just begun. But I can feel a definite response. I want to walk proudly on this path that I chose for the first time by my own will. Tonight, while sitting at the window seat facing my laptop, I looked up at the sky. As I watch the evening sky gently changing colors, I feel my heart being quietly filled. I want to cherish this peaceful happiness. Yes, this is the path I chose. And this is the true beginning of my life.